Welcome to a new episode of Future Perspectives, where I attempt to write an alternate history without our power of historical hindsight. In this episode, we will be attempting to answer the question of how I, from the perspective of France in 1939, would have predicted history to turn out. To be clear, what I'm about to say is not necessarily the perspective of a specific person in the time period, it's about me restricting my power of hindsight while writing an alternate history. So let's first look at the general French plans to win World War II. Big shout out to Eastory's video on French plans to win World War II. The biggest portion of France's plan to win World War II concerns resources and time. Just look at this world map. It's clear that Germany is on the back foot against the French and the British global power. A war with Germany, from the French perspective, would see Germany quickly starve for resources. The British Navy would blockade the German coast, stopping intercontinental trade and iron ore from Sweden. This would restrict Germany to trade overland with the other European powers, where the French and the British have the advantage too. The Soviet Union and Germany are ideological enemies and won't trade, while most minor nations of Eastern Europe would, obviously, prefer the French and the British over the Germans, and the Western powers had the economic wealth to influence them if necessary. This lack of trade would lead to a German resource shortage, making it a matter of time before the Germans surrendered. All of this would put a time constraint on Germany, meaning Germany has to strike fast to end France or lose via a war of attrition. This was anticipated by the French, leading to the French reinforcing the Franco-German border. These defenses were not meant to make France invulnerable to German offensives, but it would force Germany to go around Belgium, meaning most of the fighting would happen on Belgian soil, and allowing the French and the British to come and reinforce the Belgians. Even if the Germans managed to push a little in their offensives, it would be a matter of time before their resource shortages would cause Germany to collapse. So, how did this plan fail in our own timeline? Well, to start off with, before the war had even broke out, the Germans had signed an agreement with the Soviet Union, providing Germany with many key resources via that route. But not all was lost, as the Soviets couldn't provide everything the Germans needed. But Germany then reduced the effectiveness of the naval blockade by invading Denmark and Norway, securing Swedish iron imports. In the meantime, Germany also extended their economic influence over Romania and Hungary. Germany was still at risk of resource shortages, but they were certainly not starved for resources. With this short-term resource security, Germany could turn to knocking out their continental opponent of France. But instead of the predicted war, where Germany goes through the Low Countries and France and Britain link up and stop the Germans there, the Germans push through the Ardennes with their panzer divisions, something the French planning thought impossible thanks to the forest and hills of the region. This would lead to the best Allied divisions completely cut off from the front line, opening up France for certain defeat. And so with that, the French plan had failed in our own timeline. But still, by September of 1939, when we start our analysis, not all hope is yet lost for the French battle plan. Yes, the Soviets had started trading with the Germans, but the two are ideological opponents. Surely, that friendship was not meant to last. On the world stage, the Germans are still at a massive diplomatic, economic and population disadvantage. And despite the unexpected German-Soviet friendship, the French plan was not yet lost. So in this video, we will look at what if, from the French perspective, their plan to win World War I worked out. Germany declares war on Poland and France and Britain join in. The French plan realistically didn't call for the survival of Poland. That would have required a fast French invasion of Germany, which was something the French were absolutely not willing to do. Following the fall of Poland, the stranglehold over German resources is enacted as the German Navy cannot hope to compete with the French and British navies. Norway and Sweden are coerced by the Allies to stop trading with Germany, weakening the German iron supply massively. Meanwhile, the Allies buy up all of Romania's oil production to deny it to the Germans. Thanks to the Soviet-German pact, Germany is not completely desperate, but they are in a tough spot. Germany can now go for a desperate offensive into the Benelux, but this is exactly what the French want, leading to a protracted war of attrition in the Low Countries, which, as French planning predicted, would eventually lead to a French victory as Germany gets low on resources. Alternatively, Germany can attempt to secure more resources first. But in terms of diplomatic influences, Germany is on the back foot. As the only significant European nation, arguably on Germany's side is Italy. That means that if Germany wants to secure more resources, it would have to be via threats and invasions. But this too would be fine from the Western perspective, as it would mean that Germany would have more fronts, more distractions, and push the other nations of Europe deeper into the Allied sphere as they feel threatened by German actions. Throughout all this, Italy becomes the biggest wildcard. Officially, they are somewhat aligned with Germany, but they had proven themselves the reasonable middleman between the Germans and the Western power countless times before. Would Italy ever risk fully joining the war at this early stage? From the French perspective, the answer would likely be no. The entire world watched Italy underperform against Ethiopia, and Italy had spent massive amounts of gear to support Franco in the Spanish Civil War. If German victory looks likely, Italy is sure to join in, but as long as the war is undecided, Italy would not risk joining the war, as it would open them up to French and British harassment, while the Alps provide a great natural boundary for the French to defend, meaning that Italian involvement doesn't even secure a victory. Meanwhile, we would continue to see the Soviets pressuring Eastern Europe. The Soviets had made their intention for the region quite clear by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and this prospect of a German-Soviet alliance would be terrifying and unpredicted by the French leadership. The West had some difficult decisions to make about Soviet expansion, as provoking a full-scale war with the Soviets and Germans combined would be terrifying. But allowing the Soviets to spread their influence across Eastern Europe would be dangerous and unpopular as well. The West would provide careful support for nations threatened by the Soviets without ever actually declaring war on them. This would mean that the Soviets are essentially free to expand their influence in Eastern Europe as far as their diplomatic and military capabilities allow, meaning a massively expanded Soviet Union. As Germany gets more desperate for resources, and the Germans and the Soviets start increasingly disliking each other again as they compete over Eastern Europe, the desperate Germans would finally attempt to knock out the French, like the French plan had called for. After initial successes, the Germans get bogged down in the Low Countries as the French and the British bolster their defenses. Once their offensive halts, Germany truly starts their collapse, as the Germans get grinded down, much like in World War I, and eventually fully collapse. Peace returns to the European continent as France and Britain take control over the defeated Germany. By this point, the French, as the continental power, would lead the negotiations about what happens next, and they would be very vindictive. The French had been invaded by the Germans 3 times from 1870 to 1940. That's an invasion every 23 years. Even Versailles, which was widely regarded as a quite harsh peace deal, was not enough to stop the rise of Germany again. Without America as a moderating influence, France would drive a harder peace deal than ever before. The industrial region of the Saarland would be annexed into France, Austria would be reformed, as well as Czechoslovakia and Poland. From here, Poland would be expanded into Prussia and Silesia to strengthen Poland against future Soviet or German invasions, and obviously to weaken Germany. But these are just the moderate punishments placed on Germany. But even now, a reformed Germany would be a major state with a larger population than France, risking renewed conflict in the future. France would need to be absolutely certain that Germany doesn't try anything ever again, and would likely propose that Germany gets fully divided up as it had been before 1870, completely destroying German unity and making France safe from any invasion. But this would likely be stopped by Britain, who would consider it too radical. But it is quite possible that the Rhineland gets stripped away from Germany to become a French mandate. This would give France control over Germany's most important industrial region, weakening any reformed German industry and army, as well as providing a nice barrier between any new German invasion of France. Now, it's possible that something like this would be enough for France, but depending on how long the war lasted, France and Britain may decide to go even further. A very real possibility is to split off southern Germany as well, completely removing the Franco-German border. Austria may or may not get included into this southern Germany, but I feel like not including it is more likely to keep the new German state smaller. The final possible state that may be stripped from Germany is Hanover in northwestern Germany. This Hanoverian state would then likely come under British protection, and whether or not this happens mostly depends on British attitudes towards the Germans. This peace deal ensures that there is no hope that Germany can ever rise to threaten France again. Meanwhile, the continent is still divided between democracies, autocracies, ultranationalists, and communist states, but the significance of this wouldn't be too great. World War II in this timeline is not an ideological conflict. It wasn't ultranationalism versus democracy, It was simply another German attempt at continental hegemony. Some European states may have flirted with Germany, but none took the step to actually join the war. This means that in the post-war order, these nations would be forgiven and could integrate into the new world order, with Italy and Hungary keeping their pre-war gains. In the post-war period, France would finally re-establish their natural position as the dominant European power, likely strengthening their Eastern European Little Entente, linking the Eastern European nations together with France against Soviet domination, making France the cornerstone of European security. To the south, France would align itself with Spain and Italy into a Latin bloc, with France being the dominant power out of the three. With these developments, France is now again the cornerstone of Europe's continental economy and military structure, and France's goals, reasoning from September of 1939, have now been achieved. Germany is no longer in any position to threaten France ever again, the Soviets are walled off by a string of French alliances, and France has finally, after 70 years, re-established itself as the centerpiece of Europe. Now, I could keep going into the future, talking about French colonial ambitions, etc., but I feel like since the main ambitions of France in 1939 have now been met, as Germany was by far their primary concern, there is little reason to continue this video. So with this map, I will end this video and thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing and leaving a like and a comment to help out against the algorithm. A special thanks to Lord Atlantean, Yoshi, Jonathan White, Predator, Greyshot 151, John, Brzemek Pietrotsky, Firelord Marklin, Dinkelberg and Slayer for supporting me on Patreon. Consider supporting me there for 2 weeks of early access to videos and a shout out at the end of every video. Again, thank you all for watching and goodbye.